Hey, what's going on? This is the Body Punch Podcast, and my name is Naz. Let's talk about UFC 278. UFC 278 this weekend, August 20th, featuring Kamaru Usman, the welterweight champion of the world, facing off against Leon Rocky Edwards for the second time. What a massive fight this weekend in Salt Lake City. What a deep card it is as well. Paulo Costa versus Luke Rockhold in the co-main event. José Aldo versus Merab Dvalishvili. And Tyson Pedro, Marcin Tarbura, Jared Gordon, Miranda Maverick. There's a bunch of great fights on this card, also featuring the likes of Francisco Figueiredo. UFC 278 is one that you cannot miss. Let's talk about the main event. Kamaru Usman, the welterweight champion of the world, is taking on Leon Rocky Edwards. This is a fight that Leon has wanted for such a long time now. Ever since he's gone on his big time run in the UFC's welterweight division, he's always been calling out his foe, Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman has been taking out the likes of Colby Covington and Masvidal and has been going on a run, tearing through these guys, lapping through some of them, like Colby Covington, fighting them twice and beating them once in the latest one in unanimous decision, taking down Jorge Masvidal, taking him and KOing him in their second fight. What a definitive way to end that. Those, no questions asked when it comes to that fight. Taking on a former teammate in Gilbert Burns. Everybody was talking about, I don't know if you guys remember, but with that fight, everybody was talking about how Gilbert Burns could be the kryptonite of Kamaru Usman. Everybody was asking the question because he was at the teeter-totter point in his career where he could be the greatest welterweight champion or one of the greatest pound-for-pound champions in the UFC. And Gilbert Burns was that big test. And for him to KO his former teammate the way that he did and to take him out the way that he did was spectacular. It was such a gritty fight in that third round, just bit down on his mouthpiece and really took it to Gilbert Burns. At the beginning of that fight, Gilbert Burns was really giving it to Kamaru Usman in a way that was really surprising. Not a lot of people thought that Gilbert Burns would be able to take out Kamaru Usman that easily. Now, like I said before, they knew it was going to be a big test, and people were really wondering what would happen in that fight. But at the beginning of that one, Gilbert Burns was really getting the edge on Kamaru Usman, following him beat for beat, and it looked like it was at that tipping point where Gilbert Burns may have hit the accelerator and went past Kamaru Usman. But again, Kamaru Usman shows that grit, that one thing that you'll see throughout his run in the UFC is that grit and determination. That one thing about him that the fight in him will never be lost. Both of the Masvidal fights, those ones were a little bit interesting. The first one being unanimous decision win. And it had all those interesting events that happened. I remember Masvidal was coming in a private jet across the world to fight Kamaru Usman. And he kind of used that as one of the ways to get the second fight against Kamaru Usman. April 24th, 2021, he got that second fight. He got KO'd. It was such a, if there was one way that you would see Kamaru Usman winning that fight, it wasn't going to be by KO, but that was at that point where Trevor Whitman his new head coach was really getting a grip on Kamaru Usman and putting that Trevor Whitman touch on his pupil. And he knocked out one of the great strikers in the division. Are now saying and playing Monday morning quarterback and saying that, oh, he's old now, and we should have never thought that he would have been a champion. But at that point, you were putting Jorge Masvidal in some of the greatest striking. Uh, you're putting him right next to some of the greatest strikers in the UFC. I mean, not to say that he's as good as Israel Adesanya, but he was on the UFC 4 cover with him and showing off his boxing skills all the time, talking about he was gonna, be a boxer and all this kind of stuff. But for Kamaru Usman to knock out Jorge Masvidal the way that he did, that vicious KO that's being replayed in all of the marketing material and all the stuff that's leading into this fight, it's that was a pretty amazing moment for someone that good in the striking department. I remember at one point, one of the great prospects in the UFC currently, Bo Nichols, was talking about how he was really helping Jorge Masvidal in his wrestling, and that Jorge Masvidal is helping him in his striking because of how great of a striker he is. And for Kamaru Usman to do what he did was amazing. He's going into other people's strong suits, the things that they're amazing at, and taking them out in that discipline. It's amazing. And then the big test, Kamaru Usman facing his arch rival, seems like everybody's arch rival in that division, Kobe Covington. And what he did to Kobe Covington was, breaking his jaw and taking him out the way that he did in both of the fights. It was a straight up war. And it was the striking affair that nobody thought would happen. Again, doing something that you wouldn't think of in this fight. Everybody thought that two great wrestlers would, go against each other and try wrestling each other, but no, it negated both of their wrestling negated each other, and they both wanted to strike. It again shows the grit and determination of Kamaru Usman. And for Leon Rocky Edwards, his career has been one that has been super interesting, facing the likes of Nate Diaz and Bilal Muhammad and RDA. Some of these fights that he's been in against like Cowboy Cerrone and Nelson, and some weird fights, to be honest with you, especially the last two. The Nate Diaz fight, he was really giving it to Nate, and then for one split second in one of the fourth or the fifth, Nate hit him with a two-piece combination and rocked Leon Edwards. And it kind of put doubt in a lot of people's minds, thinking that this is such an easy fight for him. Nate Diaz, everybody thought that Leon Edwards, this phenom in the division, is going to take out Nate Diaz easily. He's an older veteran. But for him to wobble I think he was the number one contender at the time, and he still is. But for Nate Diaz to wobble the number one contender like he did and have him against the cage and not know where he was pretty spectacular. And it really put a lot of doubt in people's minds. I remember after that fight, Nate was just ecstatic, and it seemed like he won the fight just from those brief moments, the brief moments of him turning the tide and really getting after Leon Edwards. Edwards, even before that fight, had a weird one against Bilal Muhammad where the fight could not be continued. He accidentally poked Muhammad in his eye. And it was just another one where you're really rooting for this guy, Leon Edwards. But every single time it just seemed like something weird would just happen, especially, again, like in his last couple of fights, where there was an eye poke or Nate Diaz was, getting the better of Leon Edwards later in the fight. Just weird stuff kept on happening to the guy. And it's the last taste that we've had of Leon Edwards is those two weird fights. I mean, but the run that this guy has been on is, you go through his record and it's just win after win after win after win. And the loss that you see is by Kamaru Usman, the last loss that he had. And I bet you we would have never thought that when we were watching these guys on the prelims of some UFC pay-per-view or whatever it was at the time, we never thought that we were watching some of the great fighters in the welterweight division fighting against each other at that point. And now these two have come together. Leon Edwards wanting this fight for so long and, really trying just every time he would ask for this fight, something weird would happen. And, not just those two fights that I mentioned, but also Masvidal giving him the 3-piece in the soda after he won, I think it was the RDA fight or some fight, and he won that fight backstage. He got into that whole altercation. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And then that kind of derailed the conversation again too. I don't think at that point we were really calling for him to fight for the championship, but it really derailed the conversation that Masvidal should fight Rocky Edwards, and there was a whole back and forth at that point. And then COVID really had an effect on this guy's career. Not being able to fly into the country, and there was a whole bunch of issues that were happening. I think he was supposed to fight Tyron Woodley at some point in the UK, and they're really saving him for a UK card. Weirdly enough, they make him fight for the belt in Salt Lake City, where both of these guys have no background in, weirdly enough. But there was a bunch of reasons why he couldn't fight during COVID. Massive layoffs. We hadn't seen the guy for such a long time. And now he's coming back after facing some big name opponents, the biggest being Nate Diaz. So I'm really excited about this fight. This is going to be a great fight. It's really going to show how great of a striker either one of these two are. I think that, Kamaru Usman is really going to pull out the old tricks and use his wrestling, hopefully, or maybe he might just want to strike against one of the great strikers in this division currently in Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards' boxing capability is phenomenal, and he does mix in some leg kicks here and there, and overall he's a great fighter. Will he be able to negate Kamaru Usman's wrestling? Added his, you even watch Kamaru Usman's brother. He's a heavyweight though, but he's knocking out people with jabs or like just straight shots down the pipe, just like Kamaru Usman is, and the power that he's showcasing, both of the brothers, and especially Kamaru Usman, in his striking and the advancements that he's making in his career is just making him really the Nigerian nightmare of that division. What a tough fight. What a fun fight this one's going to be. One that we've been calling for so long. Just to quickly run through some of the rest of the fights on this card. Paulo Costa coming back for the first time after facing Israel Adesanya. And in this fight, he's facing against Luke Rockhold. Luke Rockhold coming back. Well, actually, scratch what I said before, but this is his latest fight was against Marvin Vettori, the unanimous decision win by Marvin Vettori. The reason why I think I'm still thinking of the Israel Adesanya fight is because how much an effect that fight had on Paulo Costa. Remember the wrecking ball that he was taking on, some big name fighters in the division and just going head first and just attacking them like with no regard. And then right after that Israel Adesanya fight, some of the embarrassing tweets that came out after about the wine and all that kind of stuff, getting drunk the night before, that stuff, it seemed like really affected Paulo Costa. He's facing against Luke Rockhold, former champion of the division, or former champion at 185. And he's just like that savvy veteran, but does he still have it in him? Does he still does he still have the I think he has the drive mentally, but does he still have the physical capabilities? It seems like mentally he still has it. Like if you look at some of his past fights and you look at the interviews before them, he's talking about taking out Yoel Romero and Blachowicz and then getting brutally KO'd by Blachowicz. You remember that one where the slow motion made it even worse than what it actually was. And for him to get knocked out like that and to have issues, I remember he was dealing with some nasty staph infection on his leg or something like that. He used to wear a calf sleeve, in and out of camps, and I think COVID didn't help with that either. But to have Luke Rockhold back in this division and maybe, hey, he can do some damage and not getting blown up at light heavyweight and putting on all that muscle. This is the old Luke Rockhold, the old champion. And he's really part of an era. He's really part of an era in the UFC. Some of his, his great rival, Chris Weidman, seems like he's nearing the end of his career with that brutal leg kick or brutal leg break, and Bisping retiring. He's part of an era. And even the crew that he used to roll with, or he still rolls with, aka those guys, DC and all those guys, they're retired. Even Habib is retired. So let's see if he still got it. Paulo Costa is a great test for him, especially if you think about it. If a sophisticated striker like Luke Rockhold is going against Paulo Costa, it could be a match made in heaven for a Luke Rockhold highlight reel. But it could also just, it could be Paulo Costa from, coming from a time machine, and he could be the same Paulo Costa that took out Yoel Romero. Who knows? Let's see. Quickly, the other fights, the bantamweight bout is legit going to be like two Tasmanian devils going after each other. This sophisticated and amazing former champion José Aldo taking on Dvalishvili, the great Georgian fighter. He's in the sixth spot facing against the number 3 ranked guy in the bantamweight division. But, I think skills wise, they're a lot closer than what the rankings are showing. This could be a real jump for Dvalishvili. I mean, if Merab wins this fight, who knows? He might just, he's friends with the current champion right now. So who knows what happens? If he wins this fight, and it wasn't his friend holding the belt, then I mean, hey, he could have asked for a title shot. But let's see what happens in that fight. Tyson Pedro, if you've been listening to this podcast before, I'm a big fan of his. He had a little bit of a break. Came back April 23rd, 2022 and got the win. And now it seems like he's back on the roll. I think he's a perfect height and for the light heavyweight division. Let's see what happens with that one. And I mean, the rest of the card is just going to be so much fun. Marcin Tarbura, Jared Gordon, like I said before, Miranda Maverick, all of these great fighters are fighting at UFC 278. So really excited for the main event, really excited for all of these fights. I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And let me know in the comments below what you think. Subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, all that good stuff. If you're listening to this on the different podcast networks, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, whatever, give it 5 stars, write a comment over there. I really appreciate it. Thank you again. This has been the Body Punch Podcast. My name is Naz. Bye.